Hey, what's up everyone? Hey, I have been wanting to make this video for the last 20 years. It has to do with the reason why for the last 18 years I've believed that the United States is going to be attacked with a surprise nuclear attack from Russia, China, and its allies. So I've held this belief since age 19, and this is why. I was living in Minneapolis in the fall of 2004, going to Bible school there, when I was working at a door factory, and one of my friends named Rob randomly just says, "Hey, I had this dream, and in this dream there was a plane headed towards the skyline of a city that looked like New York, and this plane had a doomsday clock that was counting down, and then all of a sudden in his dream he reappeared in the south of the United States, where he said might have been Mississippi or Alabama, and all of a sudden out of some bushes come out a large African American lady with a terrified look and said, 'New York has been annihilated.'" That was his dream, and then he asked me what I thought about it. After work, I went to my dorm and I looked up in the Bible, in the book of Revelations, to see if there was anything that would look like the United States getting nuked. And to my surprise, in Revelation 17 and 18, there is a picture that talks about a great city named Babylon the Great that is like a superpower, and that is represented by a harlot. And this harlot is dressed in red, purple, and white, and is adorned with pearls, and is riding on top of a scarlet beast, a red beast. And this red beast has 10 heads, which in the Bible it says it represents 10 kings. And this is what it says about this Babylon the Great, this superpower that's represented by a harlot that's riding on top of a beast with 10 heads. It says the beast has one purpose in its heart, which is to destroy the harlot. And in one day it destroys it, burns it with fire. And in one day this superpower, Babylon the Great, is destroyed by fire, and upon it comes all these plagues like famine and things like that. It's just destroyed. And there's so many ways in which this Babylon the Great, this harlot, is similar to what the United States would be. Number one, it's riding on top of the beast, so it is the superpower of the world. Secondly, it says that in this superpower lives all kinds of languages and peoples. It says that. And it makes all the merchants of the world, it makes them rich. Everybody is a trading partner. And when this great superpower is destroyed, it says the ships from the sea look at her smoke coming out of her when she is destroyed by fire, and they begin wailing and saying, who was like this superpower? Who was like this city? And I was like, okay, I knew enough about geopolitics back then to know that this definitely looks like a alliance of red communist-ish countries and doing a surprise nuclear attack on the United States. That's what it looked like. So I asked God for more confirmation, and that night I had a dream. That night I dreamt that I was in front of a palace that had very much Babylonian architecture, kind of like you would see in ancient Babylon, the gate of Ishtar, kind of like that sort of architecture, with a round thing on top, and the gates looked very similar to it, and it had palm trees, and just overall, architecture, it looked like Babylon. And when I went inside of that palace, that Babylonian palace, it was a United States shopping mall full of people dressed in black, and they were going frantically, they were shopping, they were going inside stores that were completely empty, shelves completely empty, and they had shopping bags, black shopping bags that had holes in the bottom. So like if anything would go in those shopping bags, they would just fall right through. And I understood that to be like a spirit of materialism, and people were kind of like in a trance, just shopping. Anyway, other stuff happened in my dream. It would be a long story. But at the end of that dream that night, I was riding a motorcycle in an American highway, and I was dodging overturned cars. I was dodging stalled vehicles, a lot of debris. There was smoke going up all over, and there was pandemonium. And I was just dodging, riding this motorcycle, and then I woke up. And so I was like, whoa, this is crazy. I shared that dream. That day, a lot of stuff happened. And I wanted further confirmation. So I was musing about the topic. And again, this is 2004. I was 19 years old. And I asked God for confirmation, because I said, if this is the case, if America is going to be attacked with a nuclear surprise attack by Russia, China, and its allies, then I need more confirmation. So I started fasting. That's kind of what, Christians do when they have a very urgent topic. I fasted for 3 days. So I can't remember if I didn't eat anything and didn't drink anything, but I know I didn't eat anything. I might have just had water. I'm not sure. But at the end of the 3 days, I was going to breakfast to the cafeteria to break my fast. And I had my breakfast, and on the way out, there was this missionary from Brazil that shows up. His last name is Jory. And this is the dad of one of our RAs and DAs. And he was a missionary in Brazil. He just randomly shows up and has a stack of photocopies, and he gives it to me, and he says, I want you to read this. In that photocopy, it had the story of a man named Dumitru Duduman. Dumitru Duduman from Romania, that used to be a former army officer in the communist army when Romania was occupied. Anyway, his story is that he became a Christian, then he was tortured, then he was exiled to the United States. He goes to live in Los Angeles. And when he's in Los Angeles, he's sitting outside his house there, missing his Romania, and he's kind of having a huge time of culture shock from living in American society. And this is a story. He says he starts having visions, dreams, and other events where God and angels tell him America is going to burn. Russian spies have found where the nuclear silos are, and they found a way to conceive a nuclear surprise attack with at the time when China invades Taiwan. China and Russia and other countries are going to double, triple team the United States with a surprise nuclear attack. And America's going to burn, and they're going to invade it after that. They're going to come in through the Arctic, through Alaska. They're gonna come in through, Florida, probably via Cuba. Las Vegas is going to burn, and there's a big, that's what he says in his, dreams, and what God told him. Las Vegas has a big Air Force base that I think has nuclear silos. He says a bunch of, US cities are gonna get struck. And that's what this photocopies that this missionary gave me. And then in that dream, that this missionary, that this Dumitru Duduman has, God tells him, yes, the United States is Babylon the Great from Revelation 17 and 18. And this devastation that's going to come is a nuclear attack. So you can imagine at 19, I was pretty, impressed by all this. So I was beginning to develop this belief that the United States is going to get nuked. But obviously I still had doubts, because, everybody in 2004 was really just minding their own business. At least, kids my age and most people actually really. So I knew I would have some pushback, and, you're going to get called crazy. So I was like, I need more confirmation, blah, blah, this is crazy. And a few weeks or months later, in that winter of 2004, I started having this urge to leave campus. I was living in Minneapolis, as I was telling you. I was in Bible school, I was studying. And I began to have this urge to leave campus. And I understood it to be the Holy Spirit just urging me to leave, because I was going to find more confirmation on this nuclear attack somewhere. And I didn't know where or when. But one day I just sort of left. I walked to a highway, and then I was like, what's happening to me? And I came back. So then I talked to my RA and I asked him, I feel God leading me to go somewhere. Just, he said, if God's telling you, just go, which is pretty brave of him, to tell a kid to just, And then days later, I had that urge again, really strong urge to just leave. And this is in the dead of winter. So I did leave. I went to, I think, a highway that's 169 maybe, and I hitchhiked. I was like in my mind praying, and I was like, this is insane, but whatever. It's what I feel God's telling me. And then I hitchhiked, and I ended up in some neighborhood south of there. It might have been Minnetonka, I don't know where, but this is neighborhoods in Minneapolis. And I end up in this parking lot of a supermarket called Cub Foods, and it had a few other shopping centers around the area. It was this cold parking lot. It's the dead of winter. I'm like freezing, so I go inside of the Cub Foods. And all of a sudden I hear this Mexican guy, old Mexican guy, kind of speaking to himself, saying stuff about God and like really weird stuff. And then I knew that was the guy. So I went and approached him. I said, hey, what do you know? You're saying something about God. And then he started saying, tell people to read the book of Daniel and stuff about the end times and stuff about the eagle and just stuff that I didn't really quite understand. And the guy, he was busy. He was the employee that pushes the carts, brings the carts in from the parking lot and brings it into the supermarket. So I said, I'm gonna visit you later. What's your name? I think maybe his name was Pedro Rojas, if I remember correctly. And he was probably in his 70s, guy with a mustache, short, Mexican looking guy. And so I left and I went back to inside of the supermarket of the Cub Foods, and I sat next to a guy there waiting. And then this guy starts talking to me. I start talking to this old guy, and he says, what are you doing here? And I told him, I just hitchhiked here because I feel the Holy Spirit told me to come. And I think things are going to happen in your country. And he's probably thinking I'm crazy. And then he asked me, how are you going to get back? And I said, my ride is going to come any moment. And I had no plans for any backup ride or anything. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a cell phone to get back. And all of a sudden, this girl named Luda that used to go to our Bible school, that had left like a year before she had gotten married, she shows up at the checkout. She's like, yo, what are you doing here? I'm like, long story. And she's like, do you need a ride? And then she gave me a ride to her house, met her husband. He was this guy that was like, they were looking into being missionaries. We talked for a little bit, and then they gave me a ride back to my Bible school. And okay, sometime later, I don't know if weeks or months later, still in the winter, this Rob guy that initially had my dream, I asked him for a ride to take me to the Mexican guy to talk to him further. So I go back to this Cub Foods. I find the Mexican guy, I think Pedro Rojas, and I tell him, okay, so what's your story? What else can you tell me about God and the end times? And he tells me that he became a Christian in a little town of Mexico where he was from when he was a young guy, and he learned how to read and write by reading the Bible. And he had really gotten into the scriptures and everything, and he was, I guess, very active in as a Christian, evangelizing and things when he was young. And he says one day an angel showed up to him and told him, you are going to go to Babylon. And he said, how am I going to go to Babylon? In the Middle East, it's so far. And he freaked out. And then the angel told him, that is no longer Babylon. Babylon is north. And that year he ended up moving to the United States. And the guy didn't need to say much more. He said a few more things regarding how he doesn't want to hear the voice of God anymore because it's terrifying. and that he just wanted to have a peaceful life. Other than that, the guy seemed like, he was a really normal, coherent guy. Anyway, so the implications of this United States of America being somehow linked to this Babylon the Great that is destroyed in the end times by fire. For me, I just sat back in the car I was like, okay, the United States sooner or later is just gonna get like double, triple teamed, and then they're gonna get nuked. So what do you do with that information, when you're 19? I shared it with a few people, and then some people were like, yeah, that makes sense. Others were like, no, the United States is way too powerful. We got, everything under control. One day at our Bible school, there came an army recruiter that would recruit some of the kids. And I was like, I went up to him to ask him some questions. I was like, you guys need to know, somebody needs to know that this is what Russia and China are planning eventually. That when China invades Taiwan, at around that time, there's going to be a surprise nuclear attack. I was 19 at the time, trying to do my best to like rally people, but then, he was probably thinking I was crazy. And that year we went on choir tour down to Florida, and these things were kind of going in my mind. And some of the people that I'd share it with, they're like, okay, that's interesting. But what I noticed is a lot of people didn't really have much education in regards to geopolitics or military strategy or stuff in general. So it was a bit of a waste of my time. Besides that, the attitude is like, yo, bro, chill. Like, everything's good, man. Just enjoy life. And so I just sort of, in my mind, I was like, all right. So at the time, in 2004, 2005, there wasn't a big risk at the time. There wasn't like as much chatter about nuclear war as there is now with the war in Ukraine, with everything that's happening right now in Kherson, with everything that is happening with this dirty bomb threat, with everything that all the nuclear drills that China and Russia are doing. So I did sort of let off the accelerator on that whole narrative, and then I just lived my life. And I just kept it in the back of my mind, and I knew the day was going to come when things were going to escalate in a way where people were going to finally think it's relevant. And the reason why it's relevant beyond the United States getting nuked is because if this is in the Bible, then it means the rest of the Bible is true, and this has eternal implications for humans. So that is actually the most important part. But before we get to that, one of the myths that people believe as to why there is no way the United States is ever going to be attacked with a nuclear strike is because they still believe in the mutually assured destruction doctrine. This is the MAD, mutually. They still believe that Russia or China, they would never, attempt to nuke the US because the retaliatory strike from the US would obliterate them. But this doctrine of mutually assured destruction that has sort of deterred countries for many decades, and just put us in a Cold War, and then with the collapse of the Soviet Union, this is sort of going out the door. For example, this strategist, very famous, that just passed away, he died a few months ago, lost to cancer. His name is Vincent Pry. Very famous guy. He's worked with the US government, the CIA, and everything. He's just one of the talking heads that explain why the US, why Russia and China could attempt a surprise strike. This is the reason. In regards to nuclear deterrence, the United States has a triad, which is a three-legged system, which involves nuclear silos. It involves the Air Force that can deploy nuclear weapons, and it involves the Navy and its nuclear submarines. And what they call the crown jewel of this deterrence system, it is actually the Ohio-class nuclear submarines that patrol the oceans, and they're very stealthy, and they are the number one deterrent. Out of all the nuclear deterrents that the US has, is the Ohio-class submarines, which have been the number one deterrent. So this has given the public a lot of safety regarding we have these subs that are underneath the Arctic ice, Antarctica, they're hiding everywhere. If Russia would ever attempt anything, these subs will just emerge and launch their ICBMs, which are intercontinental missiles, and then they're gonna strike Moscow and St. Petersburg. They're gonna obliterate Russia and China or whatever. That was the belief. But strategists now understand that Russians believed they could defeat the United States in a strategic nuclear exchange because there are certain weaknesses in the Ohio-class submarines. Number one, there are few submarines. It's not like there's a lot of them. Number two, they can trail. Now, Russia and China have a lot of submarines that could go to the stations where these submarines are stationed, which is in Bangor, Seattle, and Washington State. That's where they go refuel and restock every so few years or months, and in Kings Bay in Georgia. So they have enough submarines where they can just sort of stay on standby in these refueling bases in Seattle and in Georgia, and they can wait until the Ohio class submarines, they go back, to refuel and everything, and then they can follow them from there. So they can be poised and ready to strike these submarines if necessary. They could detonate, their Poseidon missiles underwater that could take them out. They can also use what are called EMPs. EMPs are electromagnetic pulse bombs that can detonate to disrupt the communications and guiding systems between these submarines and the satellites, and then the communications between, the bases that can order and give the codes for the nuclear launch codes for these subs to be able to work. The way these subs work is that there is a very low frequency signal that can be sent from the headquarters to the submarines to tell them these are the launch codes and there's an event happening, you can launch. Those communication systems can be disrupted by a joint synchronized attack on both satellites and on these communication systems. On top of that, if these Ohio-class nuclear submarines are being traced and their approximate location is known, they can be affected by a detonation of nuclear bombs underwater or above water that could paralyze these Ohio-class nuclear submarines. So that the crown jewel of nuclear deterrence of the United States is actually vulnerable. The nuclear silos that NATO and the United States have, they are a lot more vulnerable because, Russians know where they're at. And then the Air Force capability, these planes that can, they can be tracked and they can be taken out before they become useful. Plus, a lot of them are not, they're not strip ready. What does this mean? A lot of them are parked in their hangars in these Air Force bases where Russians know where they're at. So they're easy targets. They just gotta detonate, one strategic nuke over these targets or one EMP just to completely fry and destroy the Air Force leg of this nuclear deterrence. Okay, so it's very bad when both prophets and the best nuclear and military strategists are sort of saying the same thing. And this is the time frame. This video is being made in now October of 2022. Things are hot, and one of the reasons why Russia and China could do this first strike sooner than later is this. It's because the longer they give the United States and NATO to prepare for a second strike, a retaliatory strike, the more chances there are in Russia and China, etc., being obliterated. Why? Because as of right now, the nuclear deterrence in the United States and the nuclear readiness is somewhat weak. And as the years go by, there has been a $44 billion budget to beef up nuclear deterrence in the United States. And this beefing up is going to take between 2 to 5 years, and then its final stage is going to be 10 or 15 years of beefing up nuclear deterrence. So if there was ever a great time, if there was ever a sweet spot in which to strike the United States first, it would be now. It would be this, October, November, December, when the United States isn't super ready, when people are still speculating, would Russia do it or would they not, Okay, but if that doesn't happen, praise God. I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope that nothing happens. The NATO and the Russians, as of today, they are doing these big nuclear drills all over the place, testing their ICBMs and testing their deterrence capabilities. A lot of these tests are just sort of, keeping current with the gear and everything. So it's looking really bad. It's looking really bad. A lot of this talk about dirty bomb in the Kherson in the eastern Ukraine region, it is a risk. There could be a nuclear event that is just localized to eastern Ukraine, but this also could be a distraction so that while everybody is just really focused on the eastern Ukraine dirty bomb claims and the false flag situation, the Russians and the Chinese could just be preparing for this synchronized joint strike on mainland USA, which would be more of a shock and awe tactic. And it wouldn't be just mainland USA. It would, like I said, it would target the nuclear submarines, and it would target the nuclear silos, and it would target anything that the US has for nuclear deterrence. Russia is a lot more prepared for nuclear survivability than the United States. Its cities have a lot more nuclear bunker type situations all over the place. They're a lot more spread out. The two main cities are St. Petersburg and Moscow. But there's just a lot of other cities, and they're all pretty well equipped with nuclear bunkers, same as with North Korea. Even their highways are configured to serve as nuclear bunkers. So this is just my suggestion. I'm making this video somewhat in a sloppy fashion because I'd rather make it now than later. And sorry it's very long. The reason why I'm doing it very long is because I want to just make it as exhaustive as possible. I know the fact that I'm making it long, it means maybe not as many people are going to watch it and it's not going to be this viral thing. But for conscience sake, I really need to make this video because I think it's important, both for life on Earth and for the afterlife, which I think I could go into explaining why I think there is an afterlife and why I think the Christian worldview is the one that's true. But maybe I can do that in another video. I will end with two things. I can end with two recommendations in regards to how to prepare for a possible nuclear strike. There's a lot of preppers in the United States, people that are talking about how to prepare, which is fine. You can take their suggestions. In this same verse where it talks about Babylon the Great being destroyed, in this same few chapters, there is a verse that says, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not partake in her plagues." In other words, that means get out of there so that you won't have to suffer this calamity. I take that as potentially to whoever has an ear to hear. Maybe make plans on leaving the United States, especially if you live in New York City, which is gonna be the #1 target because it's just a symbolic place. It's big. It's the financial center of the world. It even has a neighborhood that's called Babylon. Or if you live in Seattle, which is the host, Bangor Bay, where they have the Ohio-class submarines. Or if you live in Kings Bay, or if you live in Minot, North Dakota, where they have the Army base with the nuclear silos, or anything like that, or Biggs Air Force Base, or the one in Vegas. If you live anywhere like that, I think it's just sort of doesn't make sense to make plans about your future, about your family, about your finances, about your dreams, your goals, in a setting that is so potentially prone to being annihilated. So my recommendation is to anybody that really feels like this could be true, especially the more educated folks that know the risk. most people won't tell you this, but I'm the kind of guy that'll just say it. Like move to Australia or move to New Zealand, somewhere in the southern hemisphere that is like, you know, safe and nice to live. Move to Bolivia or Brazil or somewhere like that isn't as likely as to suffer, you know, a nuclear attack. Especially if you live in New York City. Seriously, I don't see what's the point in trying to build a life there when it is going to be the number one target. Let's say the Russians or the Chinese, this nuclear attack doesn't happen. That would be great. Either way, you know, just like the Boston Marathon bombing, any big, large concentration of people is going to be prone to another September 11th down the line, because the world is becoming more unstable. People are radicalizing. The enemies of the United States are becoming more radical, and there is just more availability of big explosives to radical people, suicide bombers, things like that. So it's gonna become there's a lot of mega threats that are in a place like New York, and then just in general the United States. There is a economist by the last name of Roubini, and they call him Dr. Doom. You can look him up, but this guy is predicting that, you know, very soon New York could have a nuclear attack, and people are listening to him because he is you know, he doesn't have much of an agenda. He just analyzes threats, both economic and military. And he is predicting that New York is going to be attacked by a nuclear attack. So that's one of my suggestions. Secondly, if there is anybody in the decision-making branches that have to do with nuclear deterrence that would maybe see this video, I would recommend, if you want to buy the United States some time, beef up your nuclear deterrence like way faster. Let Russia know that you have some way under your sleeve that is beyond just your Ohio-class submarines and your silos and your airplanes. Some other way that you can deter a nuclear attack. You have to let them know. You have to. There has to be a approach that you no longer have a triad, a nuclear deterrence strategy, which is a three-pronged approach, but a tetrad. You have to imagine a fourth approach to nuclear deterrence. This fourth approach has to be some sort of other way to letting Russia and China know that if they engage, and North Korea, that if they engage in nuclear warfare in mainland United States, some way that you can guarantee that Russia and its cities and everything else will also be obliterated. I'm not a warmonger. I'm just talking like strategy. I love the United States, and I also actually love everybody. You know, you gotta love your enemies. And nuclear deterrence right now is the best way to dissuade, to buy the world some time, so that we don't go into a nuclear Armageddon. So this tetrad, this fourth leg of nuclear deterrence, it may have to be very creative, you know? And this is just a way to dissuade. Nobody wants nuclear war, but right now Russia needs to receive the message that the second strike, the retaliatory strike from the United States, would be completely annihilate Russia and its cities, its intermediate cities, because, you know, that would be the only way to deter them. And also China needs to have that message too, and North Korea, because they're you know, the main instigators of this whole thing, especially Russia though. As far as preparing in the more personal way, as I was saying, the fact that these scenarios and events, I think, are prophesied in the Bible, it just makes the rest of the Bible true. So I would examine, you know, like one's life. I would receive Jesus as Lord and Savior, and I would repent. I know it's hard. I'm not the best example. I have not been the best example of a person either, but just watching where things are at has made it a lot easier, you know, to try to get right with God and all that. So this is the best prepping. I think there's this culture in the United States, the prepper culture, people that, you know, they do underground bunkers and prepare food and a generator and gasoline, and they stock themselves up on weapons and ammo and things like that. I mean, that's all really great. I think that's a great way to prepare, but it's like, what's the point of preparing for that? Especially if you live in an area that would be attacked by nuclear bomb, you're probably not going to survive it. Do you want to further prepare yourself really well for everything, and not only you know, threats on this life, but for the afterlife? Choose Christ. I can really elaborate for a long time on why I think the Christian God, the Christian narrative, Jesus, why Jesus is the Savior, why He is the only way to heaven, why heaven and hell actually exist. But I mean, that would make this video like way too long. But you guys have heard the story. You guys kind of know what that is all about. So I would choose to prepare more for you know, the integrity of your soul than necessarily for the integrity of, you know, your body. But you can do both, and that's just the best approach. And I think you can do both without necessarily being in a frenzy or just, you know, having a miserable time. You can sort of prepare and then, you know, just see how you can relocate, reaccommodate your life to a thing that, you know, will try to guarantee your safety as much as possible. And then just enjoy, just be, you know, be happy. I'm happy in spite of all these things. God commands us to be happy, and we can be, and we should be. But, you know, always balance it with, you know, being wise and understanding the times and understanding the threats and everything. That's just part of life. Anyway, I'm at 37 minutes now to this video. If I might be uploading more content like this. Sorry I made it really long. I hope it was useful. I hope I'm not leaving anything out. But okay, one last thing. And take this with a grain of salt. I was asking God one night, like 3 months ago, when a nuclear exchange was going to happen. And that was at night, and then at dawn in the morning, as I was waking up, I heard like a voice say November 8th. So I'm not saying it's going to happen this November 8th or anything like that. Really take that with a grain of salt. I have a lot of informational baggage, prophetic baggage in my head that could obviously, you know, affect and have a thing like that occur to me in my sleep. I did hear that date though. Later on, weeks later, I found out that November 8th is going to be the midterm elections, and that November 8th is a full lunar eclipse and a blood moon on November 8th, and I did not know any of that. And with this, I'll close. I know the midterms are going to be a very crucial time in U.S. politics. I have heard some prophets say similar dates, like Philip Barnett, you know, the famous guy that has a prophecy about Ukraine. He said November 11th, and he didn't specify what year. I'm not specifying what year. It could be, you know, years down the line. I did hear that, and I just felt like I should say it. Take it with a grain of salt. Nothing might happen, but it is a blood moon. It is a full lunar eclipse that, you know, there is a lot of signs in the sky in the Bible that we should pay attention to, and it is the U.S. elections. The U.S. elections on the midterms right now are poising themselves up to be such a crucial time for both parties that we might see another George Floyd, Black Lives Matter type riot. You know, let's say if the Republicans take the House back, and then, you know, like Democrats feel like this is gonna be a threat on you know, their rights, and you know, you might see some riots or things like that. This prophet Dumitru Duduman from Romania, he said that prior to God told him prior to this nuclear attack on the United States, there was going to be an internal revolution in the United States started by the communists. So I think the George Floyd riots, that was just, and Antifa and everything, that was just like a slight, teaser of what may come in the future as far as the balkanization of the United States. By this I mean just sort of the fragmenting of the polar opposites. And so be really alert if you see this midterms like a sweeping victory by the Republicans or by the Democrats or something weird, and where people begin to riot. If you see this type of rioting or instability, be really careful, because that may mean this could be a time when Russia and China and North Korea take advantage of the chaos to strike. Secondly, I really hope we live to just this year to have a normal Thanksgiving, a normal Christmas, to go into 2023 with just the status quo and our normal lives. Hopefully this is the case. And then in 2024, we have the US general elections. And there also have been a few prophets, and this may be just, their dreams that they have, or this may be from God, we don't know. But they say that if Trump comes back in 2024, and it's in that context that right after Trump gets reelected, that you might have this sort of like civil war where the Democrat Party, Antifa people, and then the Republicans, the MAGA team, they just start going at it in the streets, and there is just chaos and pandemonium. And in that context, China and Russia take advantage to do a surprise nuclear strike to try to just completely paralyze the United States' ability to have a second retaliatory strike. So these are dates that we need to pay attention to. November 8th of this year, we need to see what happens in 2023. Really need to be on your tiptoes in 2024 in the general elections, and what may happen there and then beyond. As long as there's not a de-escalation in this Ukraine conflict and this butt heading between East and West, you sort of have to plan on the worst, and then but at the same time be at peace. God is in control, and do choose Christ. So that is all for now. Sorry for the long video. Hope if anybody made it all the way till the end, hope it was interesting and helpful for you. And if you have any questions, I'll try to read some of the comments and respond. Alrighty, thank you.